Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for our third rehearsal hall sessions. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Evergreen Cultural Center and the land where we are right now is part of the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coquitlam First Nations, which share territories with the tsleil Stolo, Squamish, Musqueam, Kikite, and Katsi. My name is Valentina Acevedo Montilla. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Performing Arts Assistant and Youth Engagement Coordinator here at the Evergreen. I would also like to thank the BC Touring Council for their support of this series, as well as BC Arts Council, the Province of BC, Canadian Heritage, and the City of Coquitlam for supporting live performances and art at the Evergreen. The rehearsal hall sessions are a series of 6 double bill performances that showcase an incredible group of emerging creators that come from diverse visual and performing arts mediums, cultural backgrounds, and forms of expression. For each performance, I had the honor of curating the closing set and inviting each of those artists to curate the opening performance. For this performance, however, I had the honor of curating the 2 curators of the show, which are Selena Bone and Emily Dundas Oak, who curated an amazing lineup of 4 Indigenous poets, readers, who will be sharing their work with us over the next 4 videos, plus 1 little interview that I did with both curators. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Tanse! My name is Emily Dundas Oak. I'm so excited to be a co-curator of this event alongside Selena Bone. We're very pleased to bring together 4 poets whose practices we've admired for quite some time and to bring their stories together in this format. I'd like to thank the Evergreen Center for bringing us together. A little bit about myself. I'm a Cree, Métis, and Scottish person residing currently on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and tsleil peoples. More precisely, I live not far away from an area known as Enoch, which was once a sandbar underwater, and on the shores is where much trade and celebration happened between the nations on whose territories I live. And for a long time, it was an important central place for meeting. Due to the change of this landscape through settler colonialism, it's now shifted and it's now underground and now known to many as East Vancouver. I've come to these territories out of an awe of the artistic practices that have grown here, and I've been so grateful to be invited by many organizers to interact with these artistic and literary practices in a number of different ways. And pleased that this journey has brought me here to bring together these four brilliant poets. Very pleased to invite Molly Cross Blanchard, Brandy Bird, and Mackenzie Ground together for an evening / daytime, or whatever you happen to watch this, of storytelling, of humor, and some poetry. It's my pleasure to introduce Mackenzie Ground. Mackenzie Ground is nehiyawiskwew and writer from the Enoch Cree Nation and Edmonton, Alberta. Mackenzie is a writer and a member of SFU's Creative Writing Studio, and her work has appeared in Guest, The Fiddlehead, The Glass Buffalo, and the Capilano Review.
Ahaw nito tematik kitata misagati na hueo kah gyao Mackenzie Ground at sikasun Egwa maske kusik Enoch Cree Nation uchinia Egwa mekwach niwikin uma ski. And hello everybody, I'm Mackenzie Ground, and I'm coming to you today from Enoch Cree Nation out here in Treaty 6 territory, just west of Edmonton, where nehiyawiskwew. The moon's out and the birds are busy in dusk. And I'd like to extend a thanks to the Evergreen Cultural Center, as well as Emily and Selena, for being so wonderful in organizing and so gracious in the invitation. And I would just also like to take a brief moment too to also acknowledge the cultural centers on the unceded, ancestral, traditional territories of the Coast Salish, and then more specifically the Coquitlam and the tsleil and the Stalo peoples. And as well as being a writer, I'm also a PhD student at Simon Fraser University. And so I like to continue to kind of acknowledge that relationship I have, the responsibilities I have to that. And by doing so, it comes and stems, I guess, from my MA work. And in that work, I was thinking, and I continue to think through about treaty and being on Treaty 6 territory, and living in a city in Treaty 6 territory, and living in Treaty 6 in the city on territory that my family has lived on for generations and continue to live on. And so I was able to kind of think through that a bit, and I'd like to share that, and I don't think I always get the chance to. So one more moment to just extend a thanks to Emily and Selena for providing also a nice chunk of time, because sometimes I have to go quick, I feel, and I don't get to think about and speak to such things. I stand at the memorial of graves in Rossdale. See Nit-Aniskutahpan's name, and the ground vibrates. The land speaks, and its depth speaks louder than it has ever before. As a Nehia, I want to take a moment to recognize that Edmonton is a meeting place, a pe honan, a place to gather, to trade, for ceremony. But for the Blackfoot, this place is a mahkoyis, big house, and this is home to many other more than human creatures and beings, and the relatives that were made through the treaty process, the Métis, the Nakota Sioux, the Iroquois, the Dene, the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, the Saulteaux, the Inuit, and the visitors from all throughout Turtle Island who continue to meet in this place. And this is important because I am Nehiyaw, and that carries beautiful voices of support, and I want to take the time, because there's a lot that has helped me to get to this point, which has not always been the case for people, to respect others' stories and others' permissions and withholding. It's incredibly important to do this, I remind myself over and over, because even if it's the story of my life, it is not without the stories of others, all related. And I was thinking a bit about some of my earlier work, thinking about being younger and approaching my work and thinking about what I could share with the world. And I wanted to also share, I guess, a couple poems, and the first of which is the first poem I've published, and the first poem I actually started sharing with people. And people were like, I didn't know you were a poet. And I'm like, surprise. So this is a few years back, and I was really starting to think through about language and thinking about being with my family, and more specifically my kokums, my nunokums, and thinking about writing as well. So I wanted to show this piece first, and it's called Ahbi Geo. I watched to learn those tantalizing tongues' secrets, to use these sounds, these dark etches, to release those apparitions of thought. I did it all, embalmed all. Ich weave, tissue by tissue, reconstructing. Je tisse, connecting capillaries, drawing lines. I weave, giving it blood of black ink. I did it all. I embalmed all. Gayas, she told me not to tell that story. What had I done? Gayas, she told me not to tell that story. I ran to my paper copy, pulled out the body from black ink, ripped it into strips, one by one, and swallowed them. Salivated corners ran down my throat. For Silko's sake, I ate and ate until they were woven into my stomach, text buried deep into my lining, till the story encased my hot belly and came up broiling, overthrown. That is how she tells the story. El tis zvipt a ap api geo ninogum. I want to share that piece and think through these next poems just because something was sticking out to me, but also just the sort of lineage in my own work and what I think about language and think about writing and thinking about learning language and thinking about being with family and learning family, and where this writing is taking me. And this is a piece that's a part of a growing sort of fiction collection that I'm going to be working on, sort of a long narrative. And this is about a character thinking about her mother, written by me, thinking about my writing. Mother, what are salmon dreams? Bawak anak u dinak. Those winding salmon trails in the curve of a kicking tail, and the cavernous depths in the dark in between rocks, their nests. The salmon dreams drew trails, and she followed them. Mother, before she had died, she took a book, resuscitated its innards, pulled out its spine, grounded its tender flesh in soil, chopped each invertebrae loose, and then burned free the restless spirits in its marrow in cleansing flames. She said a prayer for the spirit of those stories that were sucked out, extracted from their ribbed homes. She ripped up the skin to mark the pieces of her shattering. She thanked the voices that carried through and carry her. Then she got ready for the feast. And the last piece I wanted to share, thinking about where this writing's taking me and the characters I'm meeting along the way and the ideas I'm thinking and churning through, and also, and part of that is where I'm thinking and the sort of other beings that I'm thinking with, that being, sort of found even in ceremony and feasts, and the nourishment I get from those and others can get as well. And I didn't think I would be, doing this sometimes. I never really thought I'd ever share my poetry. And I just kind of wanted to curate this reading through that, I suppose, but also to kind of think through about my relationship with my grandmothers, my matrilineal relations. And this last piece I just wanted to share, I'd like to talk a little bit about, in that it's dedicated to Enoch, and it begins in these berries she'd picked, and these berries are Saskatoons that my auntie and her saw that were growing along the highway. And since they're on the highway, no one would really stopping to think or thinking about picking them. But they knew that they were ripe and ready. They went out and they picked for hours, brought home all these berries and froze them, and then were giving them out. And she gave me some, and I was just moving to Vancouver and I was nervous, and I brought these berries with me. I was like, this will be a time I'm going to eat these. And in the midst of I think the first semester, I had to do a presentation, and I was like, these berries are being a part of this, and I'm bringing them to my classmates, and we're all going to share these berries. And I'm going to respectfully introduce them and bring them as well. And it was so nourishing for a bunch of grad students trying to get through a graduate degree program, trying to get through the university. And I wrote this poem thinking through that, and I've always appreciated how that came through when I needed it, and how Enoch's love came through when I needed it. And I wrote this poem, and one of the last things I got to talk to her about was how this poem was coming out. And I was really hoping to kind of give her this book with this piece published in it, or rather it's a journal, and I never got to give her the piece. And so I'm now by her place, and I'm back in my community and reading this poem. Well, there's the moon and the sun and the geese are back, so I just wanted to end with this piece and really appreciate the opportunity to read it in such a space and the opportunity to read it in this capacity. And still, it's always going to be dedicated to Enoch. And it's called Berry Talk. Take a spoonful of berries, scoop love, Saskatoons of nehiyawiskwew, Misasquatumina, medicine, uskikwesik, Enoch. Her indents of her fingers held in shape. You have a cosmos on your tongue, in your mouth, sustenance and theory, the breath of salmon and wild mint, the cure of my limited understanding. Think about berries, their role in ceremony, seen on walks, picked in gardens, along fences, the research, the pause in a moving world. Berries, juicy worlds, a cosmos of land talk on your tongue, berry talk. And just one last appreciation of having this time, everyone's attention. Much love out to everybody. And thank you so much for being a part of this sort of little piece of lineage that I wanted to share about my writing and the sort of feeling of never knowing really where your life will be. But I just really want to extend my gratitude for this opportunity, for everyone's listening, and I hope you have a great evening.